team development. Bruce Tuckman defines small group development as having 5 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. In the forming stage, it's orientation, breaking the ice, getting to know people. In some cases, you may have chosen your team or be choosing your team, and that's part of the forming process. In others, you may just getting to know the team that you were assigned to or coworkers in your team. From there, you're going to move forward, and the team starts to kind of make some decisions and make some progress on goals. And this is where the conflict and disagreement begins to happen, because the team doesn't really know each other. They don't entirely trust each other. They don't know everybody's strengths and skill sets. And so that's why there can be some conflict and disagreement at that stage. From there, move on into norming. And that's where you start to sort of establish some order and begin finding some cohesion. People are getting to know, like, okay, who this person is strong in this person's strong in this. I can rely on them when they say that they're going to have this done, or I now kind of have a comfort level that I know this person always going to be late, so we're going to plan our meetings to run a little bit long and accommodate that. So you're just kind of at that point really starting to make some progress, and you kind of know each other at that point. Performing, the teams at that point collaborating. There's a lot of cooperation. They're problem solving, and at this point in the group, there's a lot more trust, and people know what their roles are, and they know kind of what to do. They know where they can call back and ask for help and that kind of thing. So performing is really kind of the height and the pinnacle of team development. When we move into adjourning, task is kind of complete, and you begin kind of closing up final tasks and wrapping things up. And at each stage, there are things that you can do as a leader to sort of help progress the team through that stage. So in forming, one of the best things that you can do is discuss the ground rules. When we're breaking the ice, be open about what the ground rules are, what's acceptable, what's not. Are you guys going to meet at a certain time? Is it okay to be a few minutes late? Is it not okay to be a few minutes late? How tight is your schedule and that kind of stuff. So really discussing the ground rules is probably the best thing you can do for your team development in the forming stage. As you move forward into storming, because you're likely to have conflict and disagreement at this point, it can be really helpful to define the goals and start defining roles, asking the team, what their strengths are, what roles they want, and then sort of putting that into manageable tasks by the goal and then by the person and their strengths. In norming, the best thing you can do is to encourage stability, and because things are kind of starting to come together. So in the norming stage, one thing you really wouldn't want to do is change things up. You don't want to add new group members. You don't want to change the goal, change the methodology. Just really encourage that stability, because your team is really gelling at that point. And so that's the best thing you can do, is encourage that and let them keep going. With performing, the best thing you can do at that point is to really celebrate successes, acknowledge them, and the teams should be really performing well and not need a whole lot, but that encouragement and the acknowledgement of successes can help feed the energy and momentum to keep them going. And then as you do come into the adjourning stage, or mourning as some call it, the task is completing, you're wrapping up final things. So as a leader, it's important to, still celebrate those successes and make sure to acknowledge the different contributions that people have made, how that has impacted the bigger picture, and, just really letting them know, yes, it's wrapping up and people can be a little bit sad about that, or they may be really relieved depending on how tense it is. But really just kind of tying that back to what the value is that they brought to that. And then again, recognizing individual contributions and appreciating that so that people have sort of post team good feeling about it. There's not things left unresolved. They know that the work they did was hard, but it was valued, and they know why it was important. Power distance. Power distance really tells us how readily people accept and follow their leaders. Someone that has a high power distance, there's quite a significant distance for them, sort of that they see themselves between an authority figure and how they're going to accept those decisions. A really great example of that, you can see in different cultures. One, specifically Native American cultures, tend to go into medical care and have very high power distance. And so if a doctor says, you need to take this pill and do this and do this and do this, they are much more likely to just take that and say, okay, and assume, they accept that the doctor knows best and that they don't need to ask any questions or engage in a discussion or conversation about that. Whereas someone who has low power distance, they're going to look to have more conversations and be more involved in that decision. So whereas, one example, myself, I have high blood pressure, and so I manage that through medication, but that's what's currently the best fit for me. And that's an active conversation that I have with my doctor on a regular basis. So we talk about the whole picture and different things. And my doctor gives me the opportunity to, talk about questions that I might have. Maybe I want to change it up. And it's a really engaged and more active discussion. And I'm looking for their counsel and advice because they are experienced, but I also see that as very much a joint decision that we're both making to do what's best, what I feel is best for my health. Whereas, my grandmother would go to the doctor and the doctor would say, hey, you need to take these pills, and my grandmother wouldn't ask any questions, would not engage. She just felt like that's what the doctor said and that's what she was going to do. So we see that also in organizations, especially with leadership, that some people say, well, he's the boss, so I'm gonna do what they say. And other people say, well, I've been doing this for a lot of years, or I have a lot of experience, or I have a lot of ideas, and it's very important to them to be involved in those discussions and feel like they are a participant and have a much lower power distance. So in leadership environments where your leaders, more socially interactive, it can really create a low power distance between the leaders and the follower. And then a leader who has an expectation of high power distance, they can be really thrown off because they are expecting that they're going to say, hey, we need to do this. However, in a social setting, there's a low power distance, and so their followers are going to feel like, no, I'm not going to just do this because you said to do it. I'm going to ask questions, and I should be a part of this discussion. And it can be really frustrating for both parties because the followers feel like they're being disregarded, and the leader can end up feeling like they're disrespected. And in some cases, it is the best thing to have an engaged conversation, but there's also a lot of scenarios where you just don't have time for conversation and discussion. That you don't have that time or that liberty. You just are working within certain constraints that you can't do that, or you don't have time to explain why you can't do that. So it can be really challenging. And this is one reason that a lot of leaders will commonly distance themselves from social interaction so that they do not create a low power distance with their followers, because they feel that it's very important that they keep that high power distance, and the high power distance is a lot easier to maintain if they don't interact socially. It's also really common in some settings where coworkers interact socially and then someone's promoted and they expect to immediately have a high power distance, and their followers at that point are very resentful of that because they feel I feel like the person thinks they're suddenly better than them. And so there's a lot of different nuance to that. And then the flip side is that other leaders really feel like it's important to have low power distance because they feel like that's how their followers trust them and will be open and communicative with them. And there's some value to that, but everything is really a balance. So it has to be the right balance for the right situation. And that's just kind of fluid. In some situations, a low power distance is appropriate. If it's followers and leaders and you're going out to corporate lunch, having low power distance in that setting is perfect. But you also need to be able to have that higher power distance when you just have to make a decision and you need the team to get on board and support that. And a lot of people really struggle with that, especially as the shift in corporate America embraces more mental health, embraces more creativity and diversity. And I think in some cases people can confuse appreciation for diversity and creativity and believe that if they're not experience a low power distance with their leader, that the leader is actually just not valuing their creativity or their diversity. And in some cases that's true, in some cases it's not. So I really think that power distance is one of the most challenging things of being a leader or a follower because it is so fluid and it's not the same for one leader to one follower, one situation to another, and that's just really really challenging to kind of keep up with that and be able to still have an open conversation, but also respect that sometimes there's not time for that open conversation. You just need to put your head down and get the job done.